All right, in this video today, I'm going to be talking about how we can use pinch pots that we've already made and assemble them together or work with these pinch pots to make our first ceramics project. There's going to be a few different ideas that you can work with. Today, I'm going to show you a way to make like a little bowl out of your pinch pot. This pinch pot that I made here is one that I've already paddled and smoothed with a credit card and a paddle. If I wanted to turn this into maybe like a little small bowl or like a little mini goblet, I'm going to add what you call a coiled foot ring on the bottom of this and turn it into like a little cup or a little bowl. The outside of this thing already looks pretty great. The parts, if you were going to make a drinking vessel or something you could drink out of, or where this is going to be the focus, the rim will be the focus, I would need to clean this rim up a little bit. If, for example, I was going to take this and attach a bottom on this and you wouldn't see it, it wouldn't matter so much what it looks like. But if I'm making like a little cup to drink out of, it's going to be sitting this way. It's really important that the rim is extra nice and extra finished. So this rim is a little dry on this pinch pot. So the first thing I need to do is add some water. And I'm going to just work some water in. So I've got a couple drops of water because it's dry. And I'm just going to take my water and just kind of work the water into the rim of this pinch pot to kind of soften it up so that when I start pinching it again, it won't split or crack on me. It's really important that we do what's called compressing the clay to prevent the cracking, which is like pressing down into the clay and really working the water into the center of the clay. So it's not just on the surface. I'm going to add a little bit more water. This kind of compression is going to make the clay a little bit more dense and make it less likely to separate, more joined together. So I'm pushing from the outside, from the top, from the inside edge, and then I'll push from the outside. And I'm doing this because I know, because this clay is a little dry, that if I don't rub some water in at all these angles, it's going to be very likely to start cracking. So I'm just kind of going around this edge because I will be thinning it out significantly to make it a little bit more practical for a drinking edge. If you were going to drink, small amounts of liquid. This is not very big. If you make a bigger pinch pot, you can make a bigger cup. Okay, so I've got my water kind of worked into it. I'm going to now go around and it's going to crack probably a little bit and I'll smooth it out. But I'm going to go around and just kind of very methodically pinch this rim. If you can see, I'm going around the rim. I've got my thumb on the inside. And I'm just going around and slowly pinching the rim. And this is actually going to make the rim a little bit wider. I'm okay with this thing getting a little wider. There we go. So now my rim already looks quite a bit better than it did when I started this. A little water in the bottom there. I'm going to go around again and work some water into the rim. You can see I'm putting like a drop or two, just dipping the tips of my fingers. It's really important when you're hand building that you keep your hands dry. You don't want really wet hands because it gets very sticky and then you start leaving fingerprints and making a mess at your desk or wherever you're working. Also, you make a mess of your project sometimes too. So again, I'm taking single drops of water at a time and working it into the rim. What I'm doing now is I have my finger on the top, my finger on the inside, and my thumb on the outside. So I'm kind of squeezing with my middle finger and my thumb, pushing down with my index finger. I'm just kind of rubbing and pushing this water into the surface of the rim from all three directions at once, just to make sure that it's really, really wet. Okay? Try to keep it as round as you can too. All right, so now that I've got that rim wet again, I'm going to go one more pinch thinner. And as I do that, I want this cup to kind of flare out just subtly, just a little bit. I want the rim to be a little bit more open, so the shape to me will just be a little bit more interesting. So what I'm actually doing is I'm taking my finger, let me switch to the other camera here. I'm taking my finger, and as I'm pinching, I'm kind of bending out a little bit as I'm pinching it, just ever so slightly. And this is going to cause the rim to have a little bit of like a flare, kind of like a bell, like the bottom of a bell flares out a little bit. I'm just flaring it out. This will make it thinner. It also is going to make it, if I wanted to like put candy in here or something, it's a little bit more inviting, easier to grab the candy because it has a wider opening. I'm going all the way around again and just trying to get the rim, when I look at it, to look even, to look like an even thickness. Now, if I have a spot that isn't very even where it looks thinner, I could always add a little piece of clay, or if it looks too thick, I could try to take away a little piece of clay, and I'll show that in a second. There we go. Kind of sliding my finger up the side now, trying to blend in that shape. Just running my finger up the inside. I kind of focus on the outside the first pass. On the second pass, I'm focusing on the outside. Okay. And now you can see it just very subtly kind of flares out a little bit. And I like that. Okay, so I also want this rim to be kind of flat. I can just kind of take it, and mine was pretty close to flat. I can kind of just lightly tap it on the table and rotate it. This rotation helps a little bit in case my surface isn't totally flat. Then I can kind of flip it over and look at my rim. And any spot that doesn't quite look right, where it looks a little thicker or something, I can kind of deal with that. So now I've got a nice, much thinner rim than it started. I've got a pinch pot here that was probably about the thickness the rim was. Got little rocks in there. That's what it was. And then I turned that rim into a much cleaner, smoother rim. Okay, so now I have this little cup here. I'm going to turn it upside down. And what I want to do is I want to almost make like a little wine glass, like a little, has like a little foot that kind of flares out here. A little decorative foot. A couple other things I could do. There's no wrong way to do this. I could make little feet. I could make little guys like this. I'm going to make little quick ones that I'm not going to keep, so I'm not going to attach them. I could make it have like little pedestal feet, kind of like that. You can see it'd be like that. That would be kind of cool. That'd be one way to make feet. You could make like little tennis shoes. You could, you know, try to sculpt a little mini tennis shoe out of the clay. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time, just the idea of it, the theory of it, right? And then you could try to make little legs. And then those could be little feet that it sits on. Usually when you have feet, an odd number works best, at least especially 3. So maybe you make like a little tail in the back that kind of props it up so it doesn't want to tip over. But you can make it balance on 2 if you try. That'd be a way to make little feet for it. It probably won't be as sturdy with 2 as it would be with 3. I'm going to actually do what's called coiling and show you another technique so that I can make a foot that is like a pedestal, and it will lift this little cup up off the table a little bit so you can really see how round it is. Now, I've got a piece of clay. I lightly rolled it into a coil. My clay's a little dry. Just so it doesn't get too dry, I'm going to put some water on my table. If your table or the surface you're working on is very shiny or polished, like it kind of has like a sheen to it or a reflective surface, you wouldn't want to do this. Maybe a little bit of water on your hand, like a very small amount, like a drop or 2 spread over your entire hand. My table is very porous. You can put water on it and it just sucks the water right in. This surface here is specifically made to kind of stay dry and so the clay doesn't stick to it. Your surface at home is probably the opposite of my surface, where it doesn't want things to absorb like water into the surface. So I put some water down so my clay doesn't dry out, because as I roll it, I'm kind of rubbing it against the table in my hand, and there's a tendency for it to dry as well. So occasionally you'll see me put water on. You will definitely be using less water than me, unless you're working on a porous surface like I am, which would be like a piece of plywood, for example, or like a fresh piece of wood that isn't stained or finished. If you're working on a desk, you know, from like IKEA or like a hardwood desk, or a coffee table or a kitchen counter, you definitely don't want to use as much water as I'm using. Rolling a coil, it's a pretty simple technique. There's a couple tricks to make it easier. I'll talk more about coil making in general, but this is something you can just try. I kind of start by just kind of squeezing the clay into a general coil. You want to try to keep it as even as possible as you squeeze it. So if I have this piece of clay here, you can see I'm just kind of squeezing, maybe a little rolling in my hand, some more squeezing, rolling, just to get it started. You want to start with like a round log like that. What I'm going to do when I'm rolling this is I don't want to push down with the weight of my hand or force it down with my hand, because I will flatten this coil, and when it rolls, it'll go thud, 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 thud. It won't roll nice and continuously, okay? Which this one already is kind of doing that when I put my hand on it. What you want to try to do is very light pressure with your hand, almost barely touching the clay, and you want to roll it and let the table do the work. And you also want to pull your hand side to side. You could use two hands if it was bigger. And the side to side actually kind of helps stretch the clay out. So you'll notice I'm on one side, and then I kind of switch to the other side. And I'm letting there be some resistance with my hand. I'm using from my fingertips all the way to the back of my palm. If you do feel like it's thudding, one way to prevent that is to lightly twist the clay. So I'm kind of holding one side and twisting it a little bit. And you'll see it's a little twisted. I think you can see that. When you twist it and then you roll it, it actually helps keep it round. It's kind of a strange thing, but this will really help make it round. The twist will roll itself out right away, but it'll keep your coil round. All right, so I've got my coil here. It's definitely long enough. I'll probably be able to use 2 coils from this for what I'm trying to do. You gotta be patient with it. But you can see now I've got a much longer, thinner coil. The clay is still flexible. You'll know you kept your coil wet if when you bend the coil, like you can see I bent it in half, and there's no cracking on the outside. That means I've got a nice, soft, workable coil. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a coil and then another coil, then another coil to make like a pedestal foot. My first little coil is gonna be pretty small. So I'm gonna take just the end of my coil that I made. This is this little piece here. I wanna roll it a little bit more, just to get it a little bit more even, just this individual piece. And then I'm going to bend this thing into a circle. Now when I make this circle, I don't want to attach it end to end. Whenever you're attaching coils together, it's always best if the coils overlap. So you see how my coils overlap here. Then with either like a knife or a thin piece of metal, your credit card works okay. I've got like a really thin knife here. It's a pottery tool called a fettling knife. This is what I would use. And what I would do is I would cut through this, not straight up and down, but at a 45-degree angle, I would cut through this, okay? So I'm gonna do it with this knife so you can get it'll show you a really clean line. Another thing that works really well is if you use like a piece of dental floss, like a wire cuts it really well too. So I've got a wire here. This is like a metal wire. Fishing line, dental floss works really well. Wrap it around your fingers and then slowly pull that through both pieces. And you'll see I pulled it through both ends that were loose at the same angle. So now I can take away this piece, take away this piece, and now I've got a little coil that when it attaches, it comes together, but it comes together at like a 45-degree angle. That subtle difference from being straight to 45 really prevents it from cracking. Then what I'm gonna do is I want to scratch and attach. This is an important skill whenever we're attaching clay. It's just a good habit when you're first learning to follow some basic rules, which is you scratch 2 pieces before you attach them, and you add a little bit of water. So you can see I scratched both pieces. You wanna make sure the scratching is very thorough. It doesn't have to be deep, it just needs to be dense. I put a single drop of water, and then I kind of join those 2 things together and smooth them out. On this first one, I can kind of treat it like a little donut, and I can work on it by itself. I can go in there and kind of clean up the inside. I want to go all the way around it, make sure it's really well secure. And I'm going to be attaching that right here on the bottom of my little cup, because I want to get a little more height out of it and I want it to be a little wider. I'm going to go around and just kind of pinch this little circle and make it a little flatter. It's going to make it a little bit wider. It'll make it a little taller. So now it's a little bit more like a little wedding ring. You can make a little piece of ceramic jewelry. Yeah, put it on your finger. There you go. Okay. When I get this, for this first object, I want to look over the top and try to get it to where I think the very center is. So I think I've got this thing centered. And what I want to do is I want to know, because I have to scratch these together too, I kind of want to know where that is. Okay. So now you can see I just drew a little circle. It's a really rough outline, but that lets me know where I'm going to put it back when I'm done. And also I know where I need to scratch it. When you're scratching it, a tool that works really well is like a bunch of little pin tools or needles or toothpicks stuck together. If you just grab, three toothpicks and kind of palm them in your hand, you can get 3 toothpicks at once, and it just goes a little faster when you're doing this scratching part. If you only have 1 toothpick, or you want to use like a mechanical pencil without the lead sticking out, that works really well. You can go around, just don't do a shortcut and do this, okay? This is scratched correctly. This is you rushing, and it's going to fall off, okay? We're looking for that kind of scratching. So I'm going to scratch, scratch, scratch. Okay, I can scratch the bottom of my little ring too. What I'm going to do is I need some water in between these two. I'm just going to actually take my little ring and just dip that surface that I scratched in the water, kind of shake it off and set it down. And that'll be enough. I'm going to make sure it's nice and centered and round. And now that it's attached, I can make sure that it stays really well attached and that it's kind of level by putting it on there and just kind of pushing down. And this is going to make sure that it's really well attached. And you can see already that that's kind of cute, right? It has this little foot to it. This could be like a little teacup, like a little Chinese teacup. That'd be nice. A nice little cup has this little foot on the bottom. Hold it like this when it's done. I want to make a taller foot, but here is my little cup. And then what I want to do is I've got to clean up that edge where I attach it. That looks pretty messy. Now I can do that with anything. When I clean it, I might clean it with the side of something, like the side of a pen tool or like the side of a pencil works well. You can see I've got a pen here. This is something you probably have at home. You should have at home somewhere. And I can take the edge of the pen or the pencil and I can kind of just blend it in. I want to pull it across the side this way. So I want to blend from top to bottom and side to side. You could also use your finger if it's not a really small attachment. This attachment's pretty small and my fingers are pretty big. So my finger doesn't really fit in there very well. So I'm going to kind of just work with this pen because it's something you guys have at home. And it'll look a little messy before it's clean. That's okay. We really want to get this first one attached and then we can put 2 or 3 more on and then we can blend those later. All together. We don't have to blend one at a time. You can add like 2 or 3 coils and blend them all at once and it saves a little bit of time. I always like to blend the first one by itself just to make sure it's really secure. On the inside, I also want to do a little bit of blending. I normally just take like a pen and I kind of just swirl around on the inside to try to make it look a little cleaner and to also seal it there as well. You'll notice on my pen, I've got some mud here. That's because I added water. That mud right there is good. I should have some mud kind of squirting out. I'm now going to go around with my finger and just kind of drag my finger across the outside here just to clean it up a little bit. Okay. Now I've got my little cup. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another little coil on here. I'm kind of just taking this little coil, pinching it, making sure it's nice and even. I like how it looks. Okay, and I've got my coil here. I'm going to add another coil. Now, because I want this to get slowly wider as it comes out, when I attach my next coil, the first thing I'm going to do is flatten it a little bit. I don't really want a round coil. I kind of want a flat coil. I could take my paddle flatten my coil. It's a really great way. If you use your palm, it's uneven sometimes. It's okay to use your palm if you're really careful. But if you can use a paddle or something, it works a little better. So now you can see my coil is more like a little bar. This has been sitting and drying. I'm gonna just put some water on it because I'm gonna be bending it. I don't want it to crack. So if I was gonna make a handle, this is also how you make like a little handle. If I wanted to make like a little coffee cup handle or something, you can see that's like the little handle, a big handle for a coffee cup. I could make a smaller one too. This would be another way to do that. But I'm gonna add this coil on the bottom. So I'm gonna take my coil. When I attach it, I want it to sit out a little bit. This is how 3D printers work. You do one layer at a time. Just gonna kind of fold that over. I know it's hard to see, but let me just cut off the part I know I won't need so that there's not so much here. There we go. Okay, so I want my coil to sit on the outside of my previous coil. So you can see here's the coil, and there's like this little ledge, and then the other coil. And that's sitting on the outside edge of my coil. That's what I want. Then I'll take my wire or my knife. A wire works best, or dental floss works best. And I'll cut this at a 45-degree angle all the way through my coil. You don't have to do it on top here, like this, like I did. You can see that little last piece. I didn't cut it all the way. Pick that off. And now you'll see that these match together at a nice ring. And then when this ring sits on top of that ring, it sits a little bit wider. And that's really important so that when I attach this, it'll actually start to kind of flare out. Okay, so what I'm going to do is really quickly, I'm going to attach this together. I don't need to talk through it. You already saw me do it. Now at this stage, if your clay is really wet and you are going to really spend time blending these, it isn't 100% necessary to scratch it. But because you're new to ceramics and this is your first pinch pot, I highly recommend every piece you attach, you scratch them. A lot of people, or if you watch videos online, if it's two pieces of wet clay, not leather hard and wet clay, but wet clay and wet clay, they won't scratch them, especially between coils. And that makes sense. But if this is your first ceramics project, or you're really new to ceramics, you might not blend the clay well enough, and this scratching will really kind of be like an insurance policy to make sure it doesn't fall apart when it's drying or it's less fragile. So what I'll do is I'm going to put that on there like this, and now it's on there. Make sure it's nice and centered. If I want, I can kind of push it down like this to make sure I get a nice good seal. Then I do it where it's kind of level. And now, instead of blending this in right now, which I could do, I'm going to just kind of take this top part and kind of bend the top part out a little bit. Just lightly bending it out. So now you can see, I didn't blend it yet, but you can see it kind of goes narrower and it flares out. I'm going to do one more coil. Flip it over, push it down a little bit. It's a little big, but it should be fine. And now I'm ready to blend these together to make them look nice and smooth. If I liked it kind of in this little step pattern, I could try to leave that and leave those little steps. I want mine to have a nice gentle curve, like a little sweep. So then what I'm going to do, I'm going to switch to this camera here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my thumb, my finger is on the inside supporting it, like that. And my thumb is on the outside. I'm going to drag my thumb and just slide my thumb down all three of those coils with my finger on the inside and just blend it together, rotate, blend it together. I'm using my finger on the inside to kind of support it. I'm just blending these together on the outside first, and then I'll also blend them on the inside. And you can see that I'm starting to smooth these together. I haven't done it all the way yet. See my thumb here, it's working around, holding it still. Okay. There's also tools you can use for this, which sometimes work a little bit better. I have like the end of a little wooden tool here. It's like a round piece of wood, the end of a wooden thing. I could take this and put it on the inside and just kind of pull this up, and that wooden thing is already round and the inside of this is round. And so this will actually be easier than my finger to get in there, because I can hold it straight up and down and I can see what I'm doing without my finger being in the way. You can see I'm just kind of taking it like this and dragging it up the side. Anything would work. The back, like an eraser from a pencil could do this too. But I'm trying to get rid of any evidence that I made this out of little coils, that it wasn't just like all made from one piece. Or you could try to emphasize that it was made in pieces and make it look like it has little sections. All right, so just like my pinch pot now, you can see that's almost like a little pinch pot I made in the bottom. If you're thinking, couldn't I have just made a little pinch pot and attached it? Yes, you could, but you might not get the exact shape that you want from a pinch pot. Sometimes coil pots are nice because you can really plan the shape. If you wanted to go in and out, I could make this go back in and go back out again. That's kind of tricky with a pinch pot. So now I'm just going around and I'm cleaning up the connections, smoothing everything out as best I can with my fingers. Your best tools are always going to be your fingers if they fit. Very light motions and repeating. Don't focus on one part too much. Work on the whole object in the round. If you're working on a round object, work it on in the round. Okay, so there is a rough start to my little cup. And you can see, now I've got this little cup that has a little foot to it that you could drink out of. Now, I've still got some cleanup to do here. This is where I probably would end up using my, like a pencil or something and dragging it across here and cleaning it up. It would look like this. A little bit of water sometimes helps, a little bit of water on the side. And I can kind of rub a drop of water, and that really does help clean up the little marks that connect it. Okay. Now I've got a little cup with a little pedestal. Now, I could have started that pedestal narrower, and then it would be a little bit more graceful. I could make it taller. If I really wanted to, with my pinch pot, I could have added coils on the top, right, and made the cup taller. That would be a way to, use coils on your pinch pot, but it started from a pinch pot. So here's a really simple little cup. There's a lot of little things I could do. I could cut out sections of this, and then it would have feet. I could put holes in this. In the bottom, I could cut out like a square, like little squares out of the bottom and make it a little bit more decorative. But your first project, if you want to make some kind of drinking vessel, you can. This would be a drinking vessel. Just to show you, if you wanted to try and make a handle, I've got this little extra piece here that's almost exactly a handle. It's one of those coils that I flattened. You would scratch and attach that. And now it's got like a little tiny handle on it. You make a little trophy, little handle there, that counts like a trophy. So that is how to make a coil pot. You could obviously, now that I've touched it a lot, go back with your credit card, smooth this part out with your credit card when it gets leather hard, so it gets really smooth. Maybe go back and do this part again if you've got some dents in it, just from moving it around. But I've got a little cup that I made from a pinch pot. Thanks for watching.